In this video presentation, I share my paper entitled All Names are Pseudonyms, a critical reflection on pseudonymizing names in HCI. My name is Kesewaa Dankwa. I am a Black Ghanaian woman in my mid-30s raising a son alone. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Kassel, Germany. In this video, I have on a black and white striped blouse, hair in a top band, and red framed glasses for myopia. The motivation for this paper emanated from reflection of my research work with elderly white women from Germany. As a Black woman of African descent, I learned the complexities in renaming participants as I had renamed my participants with common German names of women. During reflection, I asked, what if my participants would never agree to the names assigned them? Or what would it mean to be renamed by a white researcher with an European name without consent? These questions highlighted the intricacies of renaming and the power therein, especially when identity intersections come to play. I zone in on pseudonymization as an example of silent technical practices that can inherently suppress identity facets and be instruments in the oppression of voices hardly heard in the design and research of information technology. Pseudonymization as a practice of replacing names embodies, for example, political, societal dimensions of changing names. The relationship between names and identity constructions is espoused by Emilia Adrien in their work on Names and Identity published in 2016. The social power inherent in a name and its capacity to shape the life course of the person becomes most evident when the name given is negative. To gain an understanding of the HCI practice of pseudonymization, I reviewed recent publications of the CHI 2020 conference. I used the keyword pseudonym to obtain 65 papers that had the word anywhere in the paper. 50 papers had used the word to refer to work with participants or study group. The results had over 80% of papers not sharing further details nor reflection of the process, but variations of the sentence, all names are pseudonyms. Hare et al. In their work on substance use discovery share in a section their steps in keeping participants anonymous, such as not collecting demographic data nor signatures for compensation receipt. Hodge et al. Discuss in their work the challenges of protection versus acknowledgement in dementia research. 5 other papers mention some level of participation involvement in the renaming process. Joe et al. Highlight the need when working with participants to encourage openness and avoid stigmatization. The findings show how pseudonymization is hardly discussed and silent in HCI. There is a gap in literature in addressing power and the elements of identity constructions in the practice. This screenshot of a blog article from the Mozilla Research Group shares the pseudonymization process as inherited from Intel research. Names of participants are replaced with popular names of their birth years from a database. This works until participants have non-European names. I situate my work theoretically in critical race theory as it provides an avenue to discuss practices labeled as objective, good, required that oppress marginalized people. The advocacy for personal narratives by critical race theory as a tool for less heard voices is taken on as I share my personal story as a migrant Akan researcher in Germany. I am Akan. My name has cultural and ancestral connotations. The naming rights of the Akan emphasizes the significance of the name to society. Thus, renaming can hide these facets of identity. I also share my experience as a Black researcher working with white women and highlight how racism occurs using Michelle Breyer's reflection on their work with Black participants in Swaziland. It is necessary researchers reflect on their backgrounds and conflicts and how they researched are impacted. I conclude my submission with 3 recommendations for consideration to the HCI community. The first is to position research as a CRT movement for empowerment. In this way, the research presents a platform for marginalized voices to be projected. Second, means confronting the structures that inherently facilitate oppression. For example, which organizational technicalities need to be modified to allow participants to be adequately reflected in name and deed in research. Thirdly, which specifics of the research and pseudonymization processes have been examined and are the values of the research in every facet heralded. I hope this presentation presented a starting point for reflections and sparks discussions on so-called technicalities that can and are more than ticking the boxes. Which other truths of practice hide identity or herald the silencing of voices? Thank you to all who reviewed and gave me feedback for this paper. I am grateful. The references on this slide are work I have referred to in this presentation, all of which can be found in the paper. Thanks once again for the audience.